The first drugs to treat cancer was not originally intended for that purpose. Mustard gas was used as a chemical warfare agent in the World Wars. During a military operation, a group of people were accidentally exposed to mustard gas and were later found to have very low white blood cell counts. It was reasoned that an agent that damaged the rapidly growing white blood cells might have a similar effect on cancer. Therefore, in the 1940s, several patients with advanced lymphomas were given the drug. Their improvement, although temporary, was remarkable. That experience led researchers to look for other substances that might have similar effects. As a result, many other drugs have been developed to treat cancer, and drug development since then has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Thus was born the era of chemotherapy, one that continues today. It is still based on the simple notion that disrupting DNA replication and cell division will halt cancer. Almost all chemo drugs approved in the 70s, 80s and 90s were based on the strategy of stopping cancer cells from making copies of their DNA, by throwing a biochemical wrench into any of the steps involved in those processes. But there was nothing coming out of the basic science that could help patients. It is possible, and common, for cancer researchers to achieve extraordinary acclaim and success, measured by grants, awards, professorships and papers in leading journals, without ever helping a single patient gain a single extra day of life. There is no pressure within science to make that happen. Animal models have not been very predictive of how well drugs would work in people. They put a human tumor under the mouse's skin, and that microenvironment doesn't reflect a person's blood vessels, inflammatory cells or cells of the immune system, all of which affect prognosis and survival. Metastatic cells are responsible for 90% of all cancer deaths. Scientists relied on animal models where metastasis didn't even occur. By the 1980s, critics were asking why the war on cancer was spending the vast majority of taxpayers' money on elegant biology that cured millions of mice, rather than on the search for more practical advances. The funding people are only interested in the magic bullet research, because that's what brings the dollars in. It's not profitable to look at whether broccoli prevents cancer. Broccoli can't be patented, so without the potential payoff of $1 billion drug, there's less incentive to discover how cancer can be prevented. Chemotherapy drugs are cytotoxic, meaning that they kill cells that divide rapidly, one of the main properties of cancer cells. This means that it also harms cells that divide rapidly under normal circumstances, like cells in the bone marrow, digestive tract and hair follicles. The side effects that chemotherapy patients experience, the extreme nausea and vomiting, the hair loss, the weight loss, are indicative of the intense havoc that chemotherapy is causing within the body. As if these side effects are not enough, cancer therapy commonly includes surgery and radiation, both of which have their own dangers and side effects. The mainstream medical establishment often prescribes mastectomy, radiation and chemotherapy in combination to treat cancer, an approach that has been described as a slash and burn strategy. Cut off the affected organ, poison the body with chemotherapy and then harm the body even more with radiation. Surgical removal of the cancerous body part also has its own after effects, requiring not only the normal recovery after any surgery, but also coping with the psychological effects of having a body part removed. Severe neurological side effects, discoloration of the hands and feet, tinnitus and impaired hearing, are common. The treatments can cause massive DNA damage that greatly multiplies patients' risk of being diagnosed with leukemia and other diseases later in life. Many chemotherapy patients complain of a condition called chemobrain, which means they suffer impaired concentration, memory loss, and even vision problems, dementia or seizures. Chemotherapy destroys human brain cells, and causes deterioration of cognitive function and brain shrinkage, which affects memory. This effect is worse than the effects of taking drugs like crack or heroin. Doxorubicin is so toxic that it will actually cause skin burns if it leaks from a vein during administration. 3 widely used chemotherapy drugs do more damage to the brain than the cancers they are being used to treat. One of the most common side effects of chemotherapy is, ironically, cancer. Undergoing radiation and chemotherapy increases the risk of future cancers by 300%. Furthermore, the most extreme example of unnecessary cancer therapy treatment, for false positive cancer diagnoses, is more common than we'd like to believe. When 40% of the population is expected to have a problem with cancer, and approximately half of them will die from it, perhaps it's time for the population to recognize that what the medical establishment calls a proven treatment is only proven to leave about half of its recipients dead. In 1969, Dr. Hardin B. Jones, professor at the University of California, conducted a 25-year study which took a look at the lifespans of those with cancer, and in the end concluded that untreated patients do not die sooner than patients receiving surgery, radiation and chemotherapy. In fact, he found that those who refused the conventional treatments actually lived about 4 times longer than those who took them. No refutations of Dr. Jones' work have appeared, and his studies have been supported by other researchers. Even the Journal of the American Medical Association took note of the phenomenon. Dr. Maurice Fox, an MIT biologist, found that those who refused medical procedures had a lower mortality rate than those who submitted. In 1990, the highly respected German epidemiologist, Dr. Ulrich Abel from the Tumor Clinic of the University of Heidelberg, conducted the most comprehensive investigation of every major clinical study on chemotherapy drugs ever done. In his paper, published on August 10, 1991 in The Lancet, he came to the conclusion that there was no scientific evidence available in any existing study to show that chemotherapy could extend in any appreciable way the lives of patients suffering from the most common organic cancers. He said that chemotherapy is a scientific wasteland, and that neither physician nor patient were willing to give it up, even though there was no scientific evidence that it worked. He claimed that 80% of chemotherapy administered was absolutely worthless. At age 16, Billy Best was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He was ordered to undergo chemotherapy. After 5 rounds of chemo, he decided it wasn't right for him, and refused to submit to more chemo. "I lost my hair, lost a lot of weight. You smell different. You feel like a toxic experiment. It's not pleasant at all. I didn't have faith in the therapy and I thought that the chemo was going to kill me. I didn't know about alternative medicine. The doctors said the only way you treat cancer is chemo, radiation and surgery. I didn't want the surgery. They wanted to take out my spleen even though it didn't have cancer. I was getting so desperate that I left my parents a note, told them that I had to leave because I felt like chemo was killing me instead of helping me." Fleeing his parents and medical authorities, Billy discovered his own natural treatments for cancer with the help of concerned citizens, and by changing his diet and taking these remedies, he was able to heal cancer and save his own life. That was 15 years ago. Today Billy Best is alive and well. Daniel Hauser, 13 years old, was diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma in 2008, and underwent a round of chemotherapy. Daniel was unhappy with the treatment, so the family decided to explore other options. When their oncologist learned they were not moving forward with the next round of chemotherapy, he felt this was medical neglect and sought a court injunction, claiming that there is a 90% cure rate in Hodgkin lymphoma with chemotherapy. The judge in the case threatened to put Daniel in foster care, and let the state government make the medical decisions for him, in conjunction with a doctor, rather than his parents. Faced with the loss of custody of her son, and with Daniel threatening to run away if she agreed to the court's decision to force chemotherapy, Colleen Hauser, upon the advice of their attorney, left the home with Daniel without providing contact information. There was discussion that she would take him to a cancer treatment doctor in Mexico. The local sheriff issued a warrant for her arrest, and made it a federal warrant. The FBI and Interpol became involved. News stations around the country began running the story. No attempt to leave the United States was made. 7 days later, they returned to their home and the arrest warrant was dismissed. The last news on their website, dated the 5th of June 2009. Danny started a second round of chemotherapy treatment this week. The doctor changed the number of chemotherapy drugs in the protocol submitted to the court. Danny is not tolerating the drugs well and has been vomiting all day. He is understandably angry and depressed about being forced to go through the ravages of chemotherapy again. The mainstream perspective on cancer is largely the creation of multinational pharmaceutical companies, attempting to peddle their poisons in an effort to increase shareholder profits. These profits are generated at the expense of the dying cancer patient. When you are diagnosed with cancer, you are suddenly worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cancer industry. The treatment for the disease promotes yet more disease, resulting in guaranteed repeat business from patients. Diseases are managed with a lifetime of drugs, repeat doctor visits and complete isolation from anything that might actually cure the patient, and end the cycle of dependency on doctors and pharmaceuticals. Radiation, drugs and chemotherapy do one thing very effectively: they make enormous amounts of money for the medical establishment.